My name is Glenn Young, and I'm a retired United States Coast Guard officer. And I was a commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Plaintree during the story that this film depicts. I'm a retired Coast Guard officer. At the time of this story, in the mid-60s, I was commanding officer of a Coast Guard seagoing buoy tender. The story takes place in the Marianas Islands, and the setting is a serious typhoon. Typhoon is a hurricane. We had tied up at the dock of one of the small islands. We had received a notice of an impending typhoon that was coming up from the south. At the dock when we arrived was a small private yacht, about 35 feet long perhaps, manned by a solo sailor. He was sailing around the world by himself for the adventure of it. We told him that the storm was coming. He listened and ignored us and sailed into the face of the storm. We tied up at the dock, secured, tending to ride out the typhoon at the dock. The next day, sure enough, we picked up an SOS from this gentleman in his boat. They were disabled, they were drifting, he was exhausted, and his battery was running down. We got underway. It was a perilous passage getting out of the channel because the waves were breaking over the channel. We finally found him using a radio direction finder in the middle of the night, early morning actually. There was no light on the boat. We found him using the radar and the radio direction finder, but there was no light on the boat. We decided to wait until morning. The sea conditions were terrible. If anyone has ever been in a hurricane or even seen the waves breaking on a beach, they have some sense of what it's like. The wind blows horizontally and the rain is driven horizontally. We waited until morning. At first light, there was no sign on the boat of any life, but we weren't too surprised. We assumed he was in the cabin. There are certain things that people do to approach a boat that's drifting. They're technical navigation techniques. We used all of those, and we found out that we were drifting considerably faster than the sailboat. But the weather was such that there was no way we could possibly put a boat in the water to go over to the sailboat or board from a boat onto the sailboat. So a crewman volunteered to swim over with a lifeline. He jumped overboard. What we had not calculated accurately was that the ship was drifting faster than the swimmer could swim. What happened was the swimmer was swept underneath our ship. We ran the lifeline around the bow of the ship to the other side, heaved around on the line, and pulled up the swimmer. A couple minutes, perhaps. He was sputtering, but otherwise unhurt. Very, very fortunate. We then backed off, approached the sailboat from the other side, and decided to try to put a crewman on board the sailboat by jumping off our buoy deck, which we actually managed to do, somewhat to my surprise. So we got a line on the boat. The sailor that was running the boat was found in the cabin, sound asleep, exhausted. Our crewman pulled the tow line on, attached it to the sailboat, and we towed them into the harbor. As a result, we received the Coast Guard Unit Commendation Medal.